Tokoza. All right, so this particular episode, if you would, of Phuthuma At Peace, I am entitling this one, My Story, from South Carolina to South Africa. Because for many of my people, I hadn't really talked to a whole lot of my people since I came back from South Africa, and now I've had to go back 2 times. The first time I was out, obviously living while going through my initiation, and then I went back to assist as there are more being initiated and things of that nature. So my experience on the grounds as a Sangoma student of what our ancient science is known as Ubungoma, which means the science of or the way of the drum. And for those that know, we're talking about frequencies, we're talking about rhythms, we're talking about vibratory frequencies, vibrations, and the connection to our ancestors or these ancestral energies, which is nature all around us. So with that, we say Tokoza. Tokoza translates most closely in English to rejoice or to be content. And we have a whole lot of reason to be content, being that when we even touch ourselves and we know that we're here, we know that we are here because of those who came before us. This is our ancestors. So then it doesn't have to go into this quote unquote spookiness of not knowing. And many times what's going on nowadays is there's so many people that are falling into depression, and they're being called crazy and all these other things due to the fact that the system that they find themselves as a part of, especially here in the West, they find that the system doesn't really have a level of patience for our traditions and the sciences thereof. We don't even like to recognize our indigenous practices that have been around for over 100,000 years. We don't like to actually look at those realities of our culture as being scientific, even when quantum physics and things of that nature is now coming out and proving all of the same things that we have been talking about for over 100,000 years to still be constant and true, because we're talking about the nature of nature itself. You dig? So with that getting started, let's get into it. For my intro, some people that hadn't seen any of my videos, some people know me as Michael. I was born to my mother and father, my mother being Earlene Jefferson, my father being Michael Frazier. So then I ended up being Lil Mike, Michael Jr. And then for all of my people all my Nuwaupian brothers and sisters, when I came into the ancient Egyptian order, I was given the name Sermitut, which means an arranger of positive thought who satisfies with confidence. That name fits me as well. But then when I was in South Africa also, and had to go through initiation, my ancestors called me there. And then upon receiving my recognition of my Idlozi, or my guardian ancestor, if you would, just so that we can get into a level of comprehension, that's who you are looking at when you're talking to me as the character you see as Phuthuma At Peace. But my name is Kanyezi Phuthuma, and that was given to me by way of my ancestors while I was in Africa. It wasn't given to me by any person, if you would. But then that's a whole nother thing, because here in the West, man, it's very difficult for us to try to talk about some of the spiritual matters, because unfortunately, no matter how woke we like to say we are, stay woke, this, that, and the third, when it comes down to African reality a lot of times, because we haven't experienced Africa a lot of times, Africa is still religious to us. I remember our master teacher told us that a long time ago, that Africa is still religion to very many of us. because we hadn't actually experienced it ourselves, right? So I felt it was necessary for me to start giving you a little bit of my story, right? Because what I've found out is that my story, it ended up taking me through so many different things that I didn't even know were connected until I had to go to Africa. And then it all came rushing back to me to further let me know and confirm how all of this was brought together for me. And so then, as a part of what my mission and my job is here, also being that I've now had to experience Africa from a direct experience, I can't be moved by the way that we've been trained to look at Africa or Africans here in America, the way that we've been taught to look at ourselves, to see ourselves as being savage, to see ourselves as being primitive, not realizing that the word primitive comes from the word prime, meaning first. We don't put those two and two together a lot of times, and then sometimes within our own egos, we get real caught up to the point to where we think we can try to beat people over the head with information, not understanding that your perception can also be the biggest prison that you find yourself in, thinking that you got it all figured out already when there's still more for you to learn about you. And the sad thing about it also is that many times we don't even know what it is that we don't know. Let me light this candle. I want to create a space because I know it's going to be a lot of people who need to be able to have levels of comprehension. Like I said, the herb that I'm about to, or this muti that I'm about to light, is what we call, in South Africa, we call this impepo. Impepo is one of the most sacred mutis utilized to offer to our ancestors, is utilized for the cleansing of a space, is also utilized for calling your ancestors. In South Carolina, where I'm from, this particular same herb grows wildly out in South Carolina as well, and we refer to it as life everlasting. And it was always being used by our people in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, for removal of any type of sickness that people would have, like a fever, having a cold, having a flu, or anything. You could take this particular herb, or what we call a muti, be able to make it into a tea in order for you to be able to drink it. And I would suggest that you drink that overnight, because what it's going to do is it's going to sweat out whatever the issue was that you had that day before, and you won't even have that cold on the next day, right? But see, it's interesting how that connection goes to show that our ancestors have been using it here in South Carolina already, and we was calling it life everlasting. But then the state of South Carolina turned around and made it illegal for you to actually have too much of this herb on you. Because if you have this herb on you in South Carolina and they catch you with it, they'll charge you as if you had marijuana or some other drug, as they call it, in your vehicle. And they will be putting you in a position of being like drug trafficking, when this is the most sacred herb utilized in our tradition for our ancestors. And then, as you can see, the translation come over into the English language, where we still recognize the power of that particular herb itself by even naming it life everlasting. So just something to think about how connected we really are. And the only place that we find ourselves being disconnected is within our minds a lot of times. And that's the illusion. All right. So, like I said, with me being called a Sangoma, that comes from the term Ubungoma, which means the way of the drum, right? For those that don't know me, I've been playing drums ever since I was 2 years old. My father is a Baptist preacher. He's an evangelist. And my entire life being raised in music, I was always taught because I'm a music minister, that what we do musically is very important spiritually. Because what we were having to do and come to recognize was that we are playing music, but it's not a play. You understand? We are accompanying spirit, and we are creating an environment for spirit to be able to merge with us in this particular atmosphere. So while I was growing up, I used to always have these dreams. I used to always have like very, very vivid dreams, very, very vivid visions and things, right? And somebody asked me the question, how is it that you came into Nuwaupian in 2006 and they had already kidnapped Dr. York in 2002? Well, for me to share a piece of my story with you so that we can kind of get into it, I remember that one of the dreams, being that I've always been a dreamer, right? One of the dreams that I had was at about 12 years old. And at 12 years old, this particular vision that I had, I walked in my house out in the country, Mount Morenci, South Carolina. I walked to the back door where the kitchen is. And what I would always do is I would always look out that window at the back door and look back into what we refer to as our backyard and then the way backyard, right? Because for some reason, I would always look out there and see how dark it would go all the way out into the woods, right? But on this particular day, like I said, I was 12 years old. I walked to that door and there were 5 beings standing outside of that door, and they were all wearing white. And there was one in the middle. And then my ancestors that were there were talking about the one that was there in the middle, and he was in all white as well. And then they told me, they said, you don't have to fear the same things that your father fears right now. And what they were talking about was talking about how my father was afraid at the time of the rapture and the tribulation, as it was being taught for us to have fear in religion at the time. So they told me when I was 12 to not fear. I wouldn't have to fear the same thing that my father would fear. And then they told me that when I saw my teacher, who they were showing in the middle of them right there, they said I would recognize him. So then fast forward to 2006, while I'm grown, I done got married in 2005 and all this at the time. And then one of my brothers from Charleston came to visit me in Columbia, and he brought books with him authored by Dr. Malachi York. He brought a tape that came from a class called Truth is Truth, where Pop was teaching up on what was known as Jazza Abba, upstate New York. And then as I saw this video on my screen, literally the image of the person that I had been seeing when I was a child, that they were telling me was my teacher and that I would remember when I saw him, that image superimposed over the screen I was looking at right at that time in 2006. And I turned around and I looked at my best friend and I said, nigga. I said, that's the nigga I've been waiting my whole life for right there. Then he said, well, I don't know nothing about following no one person. I said, but nigga, I ain't asked you that. Because at that point, for me, I ain't need no other daggone confirmation for me. Because I had already seen him before. Then it ain't do nothing but turn around and make me get a little bit upset, because I was like, well, dang. Tamaray wasn't nothing but about 2 hours away from where I actually lived my whole life. And I ain't never heard about it, you know? But they had already showed me to look out for my teacher ahead of time. There was other things that used to happen. Being that I was growing up inside of church, I was always having spiritual occurrences that was taking place. People would ask me to pray for them and things like that, from like choirs that I had been singing on in high school and things like that. I recall there was a situation where a sister on the choir had told us while we was at South Aiken High School. A sister on the choir had told me that one of her siblings had just transitioned not long before then, and that she was having a hard time sleeping at night. She couldn't go to sleep. So she asked us to pray for her. And so I went home that particular night and I was praying for her specifically. And then the interesting thing that took place while I was praying for her, laying in my bed, it was as if I came out of my body, and then it was as if I was standing over her body, and I could see these entities while she was trying to sleep, like literally like messing with her, and she was turning over in the bed. And so I was literally in a position being above her and then seeing like these, if I had to explain it to you in words that you could use, I'd be like, or understand, right? I would say that they look kind of like what I would have referred to as like little demons or what have you, if you would, because they were small and they seemed to be like really, really nagging her, but they was like floating around her head. So I put my hand out towards them to move them, and as I kept putting my hand out to move them, they was going away. And then I noticed that she stopped spinning and being all uncomfortable in her sleep to be able to get rest. But then when I turned around after I came back to my body, before I actually opened my physical eyes, I turned in my bed, and then I saw this tall being standing in my doorway. And I felt the energy coming off of this particular being was a negative energy, and that being didn't want me doing what it was that I was doing to help her, because she asked for my assistance, right? So then I saw him standing in my doorway. Like I said, my eyes were still closed, but I could still see him standing in the doorway, and there used to be this night light in the hall, so it would cast a shadow into the room, right? So you could literally see the being standing in the doorway, and you can see the shadow coming off the door, but I'm still seeing through my eyes being closed. So what I did at that time, I got up and I went and told my mama after I put my hand towards the door and then he went away. I went and I told my mother that this was happening. My mother listened to me when she heard me talking about spiritual matters and things of this nature, because while we've been growing up the entire time inside of Christianity, we understood also that there's a spiritual reality that's taking place because of the spiritual experiences that we deal with on a regular basis. So my mother, listening to me on that, she went and got oil and everything and started to anoint the house and things of this nature. So I say all that to say this: the spiritual realities that we experience in church and mosque, in temple, things of this nature, spirit is real. Now, when it comes down to misinformation and false prophets and lies and confusion and liars and things of that nature, those are real too. So then you do have to have the ability to be able to know the difference between what is true and what is false. Because even within the Christianity perspective of things, they say that those that worship in spirit and in truth, right? So then that means that there has to be somewhere where we can get into the facts of the matter to be able to take the falsehoods out of religion, or spirituality rather, take the falsehoods out of religion and bring the true facts of spirituality to the table, so that we can actually come back into recognizing who and what we are and how connected you really are. You see? So let's see this. I got things written down on the board to make sure I hit the points that I want to hit for this particular video, right? Okay. Another thing too, when I was a child, I used to tell my little brother and my little sister, I used to tell them that while everybody was sleeping, I had to leave from where everybody was to be able to go to the stars to where people like myself are from. And so I used to tell them this when we were all younger. I'm the oldest of three, right? I'm 5 years older than my little sister, 6 years older than my little brother, right? And I used to tell them this on a regular basis, right? That I was from the stars, not even knowing that later on in my life, after having had what they consider to be seizures or epilepsy, I've been called crazy by all these people because of certain things that I've experienced and things of that nature. The Western doctors don't know what to call it and all these other things. But I turned around and I received a phone call in 2016. I received a phone call in 2016 while I was laying on a hospital bed in Atlanta, Georgia, or in Decatur, rather. And while laying on this hospital bed, I received a phone call from South Africa. The first words that were said to me was, "Rahubat, this is a proud Nuwaupian calling you from Johannesburg, South Africa." So immediately, with me being a student teacher of my master teacher, Dr. Malachi York, I've been standing up here teaching and things from in the temple on East Ponce and things of that nature. My first thought was, that means that this person has seen the videos of us teaching, you know, on the internet and things of that nature. So let me make sure I get on. Let me make sure I get on point, even though I'm laying in the hospital bed, right? And what tripped me out, that changed everything for me from that very moment, was that after he had already greeted me and then told me who he was and things of this nature, he then starts telling me all these things about who I am. Then he started telling me about all these things that had been happening with me ever since I was a child. He started talking about the fact that I was having the dreams that I had been having and experienced the visions that I had been experiencing. He started telling me about all the reasoning behind all of that. And then he told me the reason why you've been experiencing all of these things and these doctors can't figure out what's going on with you is because you're not from here. You are Sangoma, and your ancestors are calling you to South Africa because you have to be trained and you have to be initiated on how to use what it is that's within you. That blew my mind, but it also resonated so because of the fact that it began to make all kind of sense. Now, while I was on the hospital bed, I'm sitting up here looking over my shoulder like, nigga, where you at? Because trust is an issue. I mean, our master teacher been kidnapped and everything. We don't know who to trust amongst us. We got agents, this, that, and the third. But now you telling me, you calling me from Africa, and now you telling me all this stuff about me. I didn't know anything about Sangomas. I didn't know anything about Ubungoma. I even knew less about daggone what was about to be happening, which is good. Because that means I couldn't have made a preconceived notion to daggone decided I'm going to say, oh, this is some devil worshiping stuff that they about to have me on. Nah, because this particular story that I'm sharing with you about coming in as a traditional healer, many times what takes place with traditional healers, it looks like a life or death situation or a very traumatic, stressful situation for people. Not even understanding that that's the particular purpose why we have to go through so much, because our job is to literally come to be able to assist in healing those around us from experiences that we've had, because we know what healing is because we've had to heal ourselves. And then the ability to be able to listen as the ancestors speak and share with us beyond the dimensions of what we consider to be this three-dimensional reality. Because there's so much more happening in between the spiritual world and the physical world all together. And there are rules inside of that that have been being used for long periods of time. So this stuff isn't new. That's why I shared the story of the Unwaba in a prior video, to be able to actually give some more cultural context also Like I talked with a brother earlier today. If the word in the Zulu language for the Unwaba is talking about a messenger or ancestor that was sent by way of the eldest elder, if we utilize the term Umkulukulu in the Zulu language. This particular being, the Unwaba, was sent to remind everybody on the planet that they are immortal. The Unwaba is depicted as a chameleon, that Nawab is a chameleon, the ability to change frequency, change color. You see? So imagine what, just from perception, if your first language was Zulu, and then you heard somebody say, oh, we are the Nuwaupian nation. Can you imagine how the context, when they first heard that in South Africa, can you imagine the context of how they recognized what was being brought up here? Just based on language. Because see, that's one of the issues that we have, as like Pop always taught us, language is key. So like, my job right now, as this message comes out to not only us as Nuwaupians, but my family in South Carolina, my family all over the world, right? Let's start putting these pieces together so we can see how this thing is actually together and is expansive, and there really is no argument. Now the thing is to get out of the confusion by being able to eliminate the things that's not true. And then that becomes a part of our healing. So I'm just feeling it necessary to share little bits and pieces of a story, with people, so you can begin to start understanding in context how these things end up coming about. For instance, if you go to Let's Set the Record Straight, a scroll written by Dr. Malachi Z. York, when he starts talking about the Zulu in the necessity of our remembrance of our ancestral acknowledgement, and then how the ability to have that remembrance of our ancestral acknowledgement, what that does is it ends up giving us power, and it gives you ability, which is what further empowered like the Haitian Revolution and all the things that are taking place right now up to this point. So it's still our ancestral acknowledgement that gives us power, because then your ancestral acknowledgement means that you are further remembering yourself. If you can't acknowledge your ancestors, in a way that's you denying your own existence. You see? But then what ends up happening is we end up getting tricked into wanting to give reverence to everybody else's ancestors instead of our own. So then my job is to help be able to take away and demystify some of the things that people are looking at as being so evil, when they are now naming these things like holistic medicine, integrative medicine, it's another word to use, alternative medicines, right? But then if we turn around and say, well, I got this particular ochelo on my head, which was given to me, right? This ain't just something that we just go out and we buy an Atlanta cap and be like, oh, I'm repping for the A, right? No, I had to earn this. This wasn't something that was just given to me just on the strength of, you pay this amount of money and then you can have it. No, But the thing is, the value of our own customs has been taken away from us, so much so to the point that when we see something that has a real significance, we still turn around, because it's African, we turn around and it shows how much we actually look down upon ourselves. So we're going to have to heal all of those things. And it's going to start with being able to change our perception of how we see these things and how we value them. For instance, I went to a HBCU, a historically black college and university, right? All right, going to a historically black college and university, because I was having seizures and what have you, as they call them, Ufita, dealing with these particular energies within my body being unbalanced at the time and things of this nature, I didn't get to finish graduating from the HBCU that I attended. My junior year, I had to take time off from school and I hadn't finished, But if I had graduated and received a piece of paper, a diploma from there, my family members would have been very proud in the sense of, oh, he graduated, But just showing you how when it comes down to us having a thought process of what's valuable, I also had to go and be initiated as a traditional healer, as a Sangoma. And I'm very well respected and given a sense of dignity whenever I step off the plane into South Africa, right? But when I come back to America, because we don't even understand what it is that I'm actually standing in representation of, representing my ancestors, and a link, should I say, to our ancestors and these abilities of things that's been passed down over 100,000 years. Being that I graduated from there, it's very interesting when you look back at it, and it shows how we've been taught to look at ourselves, because my family members aren't as proud of the fact that I graduated in an actual ceremony in Africa. And I have arrived as Nkulu Kanyeze Phuthuma. You see? So then the value system that we have, we got to be able to take a look again, respect, and say, dang, that is real. I would have been proud if he would have came home with a diploma from Benedict College, like, oh, you graduated, you got this. But being that I graduated in a tradition that links us back, and I've been given a responsibility to be able to help, it doesn't make us as proud for some reason, because it doesn't look like what we've been taught to accept. You see? So I'm just wanting to be able to give a little bit of perspective, because that's what I offer. I offer a change of perspective. Because the truth of the matter is, most of my brothers and sisters here in America, to be honest, just like I didn't know what a Sangoma was. I didn't know that's what I am. But then when it started to make all the sense in the world as to